listening to the Becoming More Me podcast with me, Teresa Lear Levine. You're already enough. But if you're anything like me, you thrive when you're stretching and developing yourself, creating more of the person you feel called to be. This podcast is here to inspire and support you. Let's release the negative, reinforce the positive, and elevate our vibe together as we tap into our limitless potential to transform and grow. Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining me for another episode of Becoming More Me. My guest today is Megan Swan, and I have had the pleasure to get to know Megan a little bit because I was on her show, Energetically You, recently, and I was really curious to hear more of her story and her perspective on things, so I invited her to come on here. Now, Megan is an integrated wellness and business coach specializing in helping powerful wellpreneurs to optimize their wellness so that they can step into a CEO mindset, have magnetic energy and confidence, and start taking aligned actions to follow their dreams. She brings together a really neat combination of experience in wellness as a certified Institute of Integrative Nutrition health coach, plant-based chef, yoga teacher, and CEO, and she's been her own boss for the last 10 years. So 13 years ago, she sold everything to embark on her own sort of eat, pray, love journey. And today she finds herself still at the first stop where she fell in love with one of her English students. She and her husband have two beautiful boys and two adorable dogs. And I'm told her husband is celebrating his 50th birthday today also. So that's pretty special too. And, I'm just excited to hear more about where they live and what they do. She's in Mexico and loves, checking out all the lesser known beaches there. And I love seeing all of the pictures on her fabulous Instagram feed. They're always gorgeous. So thank you for being here with me today, Megan.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Teresa, for that lovely introduction. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm really happy to have you here. And, start off and just tell us a little bit about, more of the casual side of you and your life in Mexico right now.
Sure. Well, I think it was sort of a blessing during the pandemic that there's always new things to discover in Mexico. We're huge travelers. So at first it was a little bit of a shock, but we found our ways to get out into nature and to really still do the beach thing. We just were forced to stay out of the more touristy areas, which, to be honest, we don't really do most of the time anyway. We've always kind of like the quieter, more charming little towns. And but life is good. And we are getting back into traveling more internationally again. So that's, I think, liberating on some respect. Me being an expat, it was a bit of a stress not to be able to go home to Canada for the last 3 years, but we're excited to go to our cottage in northern Saskatchewan in July.
That's awesome. Where have you been able to go since the pandemic? Like, where have you gotten to travel since all this craziness started?
Well, one place you should really get to before it explodes is an island called Holbox. It's pronounced, in English, you would read it Holbox, but it's pronounced Holbox. And it's north of Cancun. You would fly into Cancun and it's a 2-hour drive. And it's just this absolute bliss. There's about 200 meters of a really shallow, Caribbean beach that goes into, and there's pelicans, and it's still a nature preserve, but it's debatable how long that's going to. It's just this kind of like sleepy fisherman's village island, and it's just spectacular. So
that sounds amazing.
Are there places
to stay near there?
Oh yeah, like there's an established sort of boho chic. There's lots of hotels now, but there aren't any, giant hotels or like all-inclusive resort type deals yet. And yeah, the kids love it because there's so much wildlife. There's iguanas everywhere and so many birds, and it's perfect for paddleboarding because it's just so shallow and calm, the ocean there. Nice. And it's just beautiful. So that was one place we went a few times.
I would imagine, as someone who practices yoga, that you're quite good at paddleboarding also, all of the balance and strength that go into that.
Yeah. And I practice yoga on the paddleboard too. Switch it up. It really challenges you on the headstands.
That is really cool. And I'm definitely gonna be like looking that up to check out some pictures online and see about maybe adding that to our bucket list also. I love trying new places. And it sounds like you've gotten to go to quite a few kind of off the beaten path places. So that's really cool. Now, I know when I was on your show and we were talking about you coming on here, you were sharing a little bit about kind of your experience and the problems you see with the mommy wine culture that has gotten so big these days. And I was hoping maybe you could share a little bit about your story with alcohol and everything that kind of relates to that and how that unfolded for you.
Sure. Well, I recently wrote an article on my wine story. And I think I basically grew up in a household and in a culture in general in Canada that, I was taught from a very young age that, wine is culture, wine, like knowing what grapes come from what part of the world, and that a very nice dinner and that any major celebration is accompanied by a fine wine, right? And so I took a lot of pride even as a young girl in like knowing that kind of information. And it didn't really become like a huge problem, I would say, until I was in my really early 20s. And it sort of like ebbed and flowed in terms of the degree and the severity of the problem. I always refer to myself as was a very high functioning alcoholic. It didn't really dramatically affect my career at any point per se, but I can see now looking back that it held me back in small ways all along the way. And I know now that, the cumulative effect of being held back and really held back by my own belief system of what was possible for myself, because it was just this self-fulfilling prophecy of shame and blame and feeling crappy about what I'd done the night before, and just like not having a really expansive vision of what I was capable of. And, I won't get too much into it, but, basically my dad was an alcoholic. He committed suicide when I was 17. And that kind of spun me into this, I was already a pretty dark, jaded, sarcastic 16-year-old. And that kind of like spun me into this very, kind of thinking like that I just was playing with fire, like it was all self-sabotaging behavior as a way to process, that everything happens for a reason. So I can be as risky as I want with my health, I would drink and drive a lot. Just so many things that were, became a part of my identity, being this sort of, risky, witty, sarcastic 20 something. And then when I was in my 30s, it was similar. And it really wasn't until I got pregnant. And I think that's a time when a lot of women like take a really deep overhaul of what they're consuming. And it's also a culturally, socially acceptable time to completely stop drinking, right? And so I actually thought it was going to be harder than it was at that point, but really it didn't, like my body, maybe it was a gift, but my body just like the alcohol just didn't taste the same. I try to have like a small glass of wine here and there and just nothing.
Did you feel like your family ties with alcohol and being educated with it and everything, like had you in a place where you felt like you needed to drink? Like, was that part of like being part of your tribe and your family?
Oh, totally. And to the point where now, it's now that when I'm with them, there's like this tension because, like, I don't necessarily think that anybody else needs to make the decision I made. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing scenario for many, but I think one thing that is important to me in being a coach is to really bring it to attention of women. Specifically, I tend to work with women because, even though you're not in the category at all that you would consider yourself having a quote unquote drinking problem, we're really not educated around how alcohol is affecting us. And to the degree it's affecting your sleep. And it's this cycle of ways that it's cumulatively bringing your energy down, affecting your overall mental, emotional, physical health. And And because it's so socially integrated, it's the only drug that you have to have a really good explanation as to why you're not going to consume it with everybody else. Every other drug, it's like the opposite. But yeah, so I mean, it's obviously I've been sober for over 4 years now, so it's not like this.
That's great.
And my family is very, very supportive, and it's not. But yeah, I mean, it continues.
But it's a difference that you notice because it's so different with the rest of them than it is with you. It's a
yeah, and I think they feel, because I'm critical of these stories that I had going in my own head around drinking and wine culture, that they necessarily need to do that same, analyzing of their own behavior.
I know a lot of people worry that they think other people are worrying that they're being judged by you, in that position, when it's like, hey, this is about me, not it doesn't have anything to do with you. Like,
exactly. And the fact that it maybe triggers like that kind of reaction, maybe there is something that you want to consider for yourself, but that's not my place, like that. I really, is a journey. And I learned that the hard way with my dad, I, as a young teenager, really tried to inspire him to quit drinking. And it's not in those types of addictions, it's really something that the individual has to have a greater why. It's very hard to quit any really bad habit like that. I would say any bad habit. It's really hard to quit any bad habit for somebody else. You have to come to it on your own as something that, a personal why. So back to my story, like my main personal why, I was given this gift because I had 2 pregnancies in between. Both boys, I breastfed for 13 months plus. So basically like 4 years with pregnancies and breastfeeding where I didn't drink, I had a sip of wine here and there. And so then after that, like I really still had this story going on in my head that I was looking forward to getting back to, going for nice dinners with my husband and sharing a couple bottles of wine and like going for, girls' nights and all this. And it just didn't quite resonate, mostly because I was just still so sleep deprived that hangovers and parenting, for me, it was very clear from the beginning that like they did not go together. And so I tried initially to do this sort of mindful drinking experiment for myself and gave myself a year to see if I was, very, very quote unquote mindful, but essentially controlling and aware of what exactly I was drinking, and had all these rules. And it's a very common thing for alcoholics to do for themselves. And I just had this like wellness spin on it of calling it mindful, but I really did hardly drink that year. And I just had the one or a few incidences that again reinforced for me, like it just spun me again into this deep shame and blame. And I crossed some lines that I swore as a kid growing up with an alcoholic I would never do. And I just had enough of my own, So I'm what they call a spontaneous sobriety case, meaning like I didn't go to any 12-step program. I didn't even really have a coach at that time. Like it's not something I worked through with anyone. I did, like one of my long-term best friends, she and I used to get hammered together for decades. But she got sober, she's probably on about 12 years, like almost 10 years before I did. And so she was kind of like my only touch point of, hey, I'm starting to feel this and notice this. And she's like, yeah, normal. You're at 7 months, or yeah, it's 2 years. Like and it really wasn't until the pandemic where I really did a deep dive into bringing my business entirely online and spending a lot more time in Instagram specifically, where I met and have connected with many sobriety communities of all types. And there are many that are just moms, for example. And it's nice to have that support, because sometimes, just to like how you're saying, it's nice to have a community of people that you don't have to explain all this to, or justify why you don't want to drink all the time.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's also great to be able to get to a place where you don't even think about that anymore, which it sounds like you're probably pretty close to, where it's just like, I'm just doing this for me or, whatever, and you don't have to worry about it. And that's a really awesome thing too. Um, I know for me, like I'm not sober in the sense that I drink every now and then, but I don't drink much at all. And I when I used to drink more often, I would start to notice, like, as the day wore on, getting that kind of like little bit of anxiousness or feeling like, oh, sure would be nice, to have that glass of wine now or whatever. And I really disliked that. And it's like, as soon as that came into my consciousness, I was like, yeah, this isn't going to be my story. Like, I really like nipped it in the bud. And, I had 4 kids and I drank a little bit, like a glass of wine here and there during my pregnancies, but not much at all. And then of course, like you said, like the whole like having a hangover and a baby, like there is just no managing that. Like it's just, might have happened once or twice with my youngest one, and I was like, yeah, nope. That's like the worst. Like it's worse than a hangover because it's like you don't get to just sleep through it. It's not like you can just take some Tylenol and go back to bed and deal with it later. Like somebody needs you and they need you now and they need you like full on. And yeah, that was all very eye-opening to me. And I have history of alcoholism in my family too. So all of what you're saying really resonates. And, I get so sad, I think, when I hear, moms or I see posts, is it 5 o'clock yet? Or, I just can't wait for the date. And I'm just like, it's like a lack of appreciation and gratitude for all we have going on in our lives that we're just wishing away time. It's the same thing with like, is it Friday yet? It's like, why are we choosing to settle for this existence that we're constantly trying to fast forward so that we can buffer and numb and then go back and do it all over again? Like it just seems so unfulfilling to me as a whole.
Yeah. Well, for me, that was the essential shift of, okay, wait, I'm doing all the, like, I've been practicing yoga for 10 years at that point. So it was like living this weird double lifestyle as like a yoga teacher. And it's pretty common, but what you said about numbing, like I used to consciously seek Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday brunch to numb out a little bit. And now I seek clarity. And I'm very clear that my own self-confidence comes from that clarity and really just being who I am instead of trying to feel less of who I am or, really not accept who I am or not deal with emotions. Like there's so many reasons that we drink, but for me, it was also so key that I wanted to present my kids with a different narrative about how to live, you don't have to have wine at every birthday party. You don't have to have like, and they, my husband still drinks. So it's not like it's not in the house, but they're presented with different narratives. And I think that's important because it's just so prevalent and I was actually recently in Charleston, South Carolina, and we went to some of these cute little boutiques. And to me, it was like quite confrontational at times, just tea towels and everything that had like very sarcastic, embracing the wine, the martini, like, I don't know. And sometimes like, people send me like a picture of a storefront where it's just like everything towards mummy wine culture, and I get it because I was in it. And, and I very much thought that was who, the kind of mom I would be, if you will, and tongue in cheek embraced it or, like thought of that as a good thing. But I think there are a lot of women that get caught up in it just because that's what everyone else is doing. And they don't feel like there's a space or a place to not have the glass of wine or to, not have some alcoholic beverage in their soccer thermos or whatever. And one thing that's really encouraging, and the one thing that I've found extensively through the pandemic, is networking with so many of these companies. Like there's really cool non-alcoholic products and like mocktail bars popping up. And there's just so much, because the other great thing is the next generation. I mean, they're not as interested for all these wellness and clarity reasons. in getting drunk as much as I would have been at that stage of the game.
Yeah. Yeah. For as many ways as our kids seem like they're getting into certain things earlier, a lot of the more dangerous things do seem like they're a little bit more on the back burner, or they're a little bit more hesitant about it. And just for like more reasons of them having like better self-esteem around it, I guess, or a whole bunch of things. But I know like clarity is super important to me too. And I feel like clarity goes really like hand in hand with our intuition. And I know you're a big proponent of, developing intuition and everything else as well. So how did you learn to trust your intuition, or how do you help others to do that?
Well, I think part of it is just like anything, taking the action based on an inclination, a nudge, like doing the thing that some part of you on a heart, soul, body level feels like you should do, but it doesn't logically make sense to your narrative.
But it's new. That's really hard, I think, because I think a lot of people are going, well, that's not enough. It's just, like we know now, like that's totally enough. Like that's intuition. That's huge. But I think when people haven't been trusting it, it's like, I've got this feeling, but that's not enough to make this leap or this decision or whatever. So any advice for kind of getting to that place of like leaning into it more?
Yeah, I had an analogy presented to me the other day, and I think it can be applied, it really just feeling more into when somebody asks you, like, what kind of food do you feel like eating? And actually like asking your body for a moment instead of like thinking what the answer is and like answering like, well, I already had Thai the last week, like not making an intellectual response out of it. Instead, just taking a moment and being like, imagining the spices that are in Indian food, or imagining what's in Italian, like, and just having like a more gut reaction. And you can do that with anything, like for essential oils, for example, like really just feeling in and then trusting. It's like, oh no, I hate that fragrance. And this is like, this one speaks to me. And maybe I don't know where, or, I feel like I've smelt it before. And like, just kind of leaning into those day-to-day preferences, and maybe analyzing not from intellectual standpoint, but like feeling into your body. It's like knowing that you could just trust that you're like attracted to certain things, and it might not have a logical reason attached to it, and you're not attracted to other things. It's just kind of practicing that where you can in your life, where
I think a lot of people don't realize that the whole idea of a gut feeling is actually based on the science of what happens in our gut, and like the receptors and the neurotransmitters and all the things that are actually like giving us that feeling and like supporting it for us in a scientific way, not just in this like woo woo, like I have this feeling kind of way. And I think that's really important too, because I think when people understand that there's actually some logic to our intuition, then it feels more acceptable.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of incredible new science showing us that essentially we have at least 3 brains, like in the sense that there are organs, the intestines and the heart center, for example, that are not just receiving messages from our brain, but also sending them. And so even just knowing that shift, I think can help people, give more power to those parts of the body when they're asking themselves to make a decision.
So like as a plant-based chef and somebody who, really believes in the integrative aspect of things, do you think there's a better way we can be feeding ourselves with like actual food that would support our intuition and things better? Or is that just crazy talk?
No, totally. I mean, I teach intuitive eating to my clients. So what does that mean? Basically tuning in and asking yourself and trusting that there's a reason that you're craving meat, maybe more so in a given part of the month. Like me, I just before I'm about to menstruate, I always crave beef, which makes perfect sense,
Iron.
And an iron deficiency that you're going to have leading up to bleeding. And I have trusted those things. And I think part of it is one, accepting that we are all extremely bio-individual. And like what we're eating depends on our phase of our life, gender, where we're living in the world, blood type. Like there's so many factors that not only change between individuals, but for a given individual within a month, their year, their lifespan. And so it's so important that we lean into these tools of feeling into our body and being, and trusting the intuitive reaction that we have to food. I think one of the I was taking a course from a woman that specializes in picky eaters, basically, but it really made a lot of sense for intuitive eating. She gave this example of, like, imagine you're at a extremely fancy ball in China, let's say, and like you don't speak a word of the language and you're served like a black soup that just looks horrible, and like everything in your being is like, I don't want to try that. I don't want to try, like we have this very instinctual animal survival mechanism, which is, I don't know what that is. Like, why do I need to try it?
Yeah.
It's potentially dangerous, right? And so just having like a lot more love also as moms for our kids, like when they have a, very clear reaction that they don't want to try something, make it okay, because they say there's like basically you need to have 7 touch points with a new food to be open to it. You like, first you
like
see
27 if you're my kids, slight differences, but
And so the same thing goes for adults, like once maybe your grandmother gave you like overly cooked broccoli, and like that memory of this horrible broccoli is just, saved in your cells. And so you have this gut reaction that you hate broccoli. It's like, let me prepare some broccoli for you. Like there are so many ways.
Come do some EFT tapping with me and we can work through the broccoli block.
Yeah, that is to say, not everyone. Yeah, and not everyone needs to eat broccoli. Like, and literally, broccoli can be very hard on the digestion for some people, and they should not eat it. So it's all about this trial and error process, which is not an answer most people like. Most things in the health and wellness industry, it's like, this is the solution. It's quick and it's for everybody. Completely not true. There is no one size fits all. Wellness, you really need to go through this process and have patience with the process, and also know that you're developing these tools to trust your intuition on what you should be eating when and how much. And in that trust, part of it is, knowing that you might be going against like a stronger, broader message from the wellness industry, right, let's say. And then it's okay, to shift, like I've known and met a lot of women and men who, kind of went down the vegan or vegetarian route, or they did that for a decade, let's say. And at some point they came around to the fact that, it didn't serve them anymore, or their lifestyle shift. And now they're living in a country where it's like, doesn't make as much sense. And,
right,
there's like so many factors. So it's really about trying things out, seeing what gives you more energy, supports your digestion, doesn't keep you up at night, like all of these things where if you're not eating the right things, it can really cause a discomfort.
Well, I think that's exactly it, Megan. Like we're working on all this intuition development and everything. And it's because there's not a one size fits all with anything. Like there's not a one size fits all with coaching, with our diet, with whatever therapy we need. And if we don't have intuition and clarity around ourselves, what we want, everything else, then we really can't choose what's ever going to work the best for us, because we're constantly just like grabbing at straws and trying what, our friend, our neighbor, or sister, or whoever else is trying, even if it doesn't feel aligned, So
yeah, well, I think, and I'm optimistic that we have essentially this embodiment revolution coming at us from many threads. And it's all about the fact that our society right now is very intellectual and very accelerated. Everything's a mind and quick solution. And we're just consuming so much information that it's overwhelming. And so people tune out and either do what they've always been doing, which may or may not be working for them, or, kind of fall victim to the quick the miracle solutions, and that's not where it's at. I'm all about things being integrated and sustainable, really looking at it as a lifelong shift, so that it becomes a part of who you are, and it's not something that's on your to-do list.
Right. So when you work with other wellpreneurs, what does that look like? Like how do you help them to level up in their businesses and to get to that place of being able to trust themselves more and feel more aligned with their actions as they chase their dreams?
Yeah, well, I mean, number one is making sure that they are prioritizing their own optimal wellness. Like, as any solopreneur, entrepreneur, really, mom knows, like, usually the first thing to go out the window when you're getting traction on a new project is your own health and wellness. So that's why I make it essential that we build their systems, their structure, and the entire business around prioritizing their own optimal wellness. Essentially, it's your greatest asset. It's like investing in your business to take care of yourself. And so
you can't run it if you're run down, right?
Exactly, or not for long, right? And you want to have,
Not well.
You want it to be this long-term plan, not something you're going to do and then burn out. So that's number one. And number two is usually, there's always mindset blocks that go every step along the way of being an entrepreneur, and they come up at every level, right? So it could be someone who's just starting out and just having the confidence and clarity that they're completely capable of doing this, or someone who's about to really level up their business. And the same thing, like the same blocks tend to come up at every level. And so just giving them the tools to work out and know that, just because you're already in an extremely successful point in your business doesn't mean that you're not going to ever doubt yourself. Like, everybody at every level of society has self-doubt at some point. And really just having tools like EFT tapping is a great one. Journaling is another one that I'm always recommending to clients. And it loops back that when you're taking really good care of yourself, it's a lot easier to be clear and confident in what you're doing. It's when we start eating, in my case, I'm still, addicted to sugar. So that's like the thing that creeps into my life once in a while. And it doesn't take more than a couple of days of just eating more dessert than I really need to, right, for example, or that I feel a little less enthusiastic about getting up in the morning and doing what I need to do. Or
same thing happens to me from time to time. That was one of the first things that I actually tried EFT tapping on, was cravings. And I was like so amazed at how crazy that was. But I find that a lot of times, myself included, people get resistant about wanting to eliminate a craving because they enjoy whatever the thing is so much, and they're afraid of what they might have to face or deal with if they didn't. It's no different than the wine or the, whatever else, but it's just like, I don't know if I really want to not like that anymore. And I have to be like, well, it's not like you're not going to like it. You're just going to feel like you have like way more control over your choice to eat it or not eat it, or to overeat it, or have a normal portion, that kind of thing. But amazing for me, because I used to have this awful habit of getting into like the peanut butter. I still love peanut butter, and the marshmallow fluff. And like, okay, I would get one spoon, both things on the one spoon, and eat, and then repeat. And then, like, who knows how many times that would happen before the containers got put away. But like, there goes like a day's worth of like caloric intake and like not much value. I mean, the peanut butter got better over the years. Like, it used to be like the really crappy stuff with like the processed sugars and everything else in it. And at least now, if I was to do it, it would be like a good like chunk.
It's like health store peanut butter,
no sugar added peanut butter, but the marshmallow fluff is still crap either way. So, but it's crazy. It used to be like a big thing that would happen very often for me, and definitely would sabotage my maintenance of my body and the way that I like to keep it, and the way that I like to feel and function and everything else. And not anymore. So that's a good one for the cravings. But yeah, there's the sugars. It's funny how it's, more addictive than cocaine, heroin, like all those things and all the studies. And yet we just still kind of keep casually approaching it like over and over again.
Well, I mean, there's a massive industry selling it to us. A, B, it's still completely socially acceptable, right? I mean, even though arguably, sadly, obesity isn't socially acceptable, or diabetes, or like all of the major epidemics that we have, in Mexico, in North America, increasingly globally. The reality is we are all taught from a very young age. So we have the massive global consumerism selling us from every side. Then we have the fact that nobody really has a problem with, making a child feel better with an ice cream cone, or, I used to get suckers from my doctor on the way out the door, as like, even my dentist, I'm pretty sure, used to give us lollipops. So it's just this like weird, yeah. But it's like this deep emotional messaging that we receive from a very young age that celebrate, similar to the wine. Obviously it's different with kids and sugar. It starts much younger, I guess is what I want to say. But that, if you feel sad, sugar. If you feel happy, it's your birthday, it's Christmas, it's like everything is around sugar. And so it's very difficult to completely, I think that speaks to like why your clients don't want to entirely break up with
celebrate.
sugar.
Every day there's an occasion or a reason or whatever to celebrate. Then every day we should be having sugar. That's the message I always hear, at least, and it's not true. It's just beliefs, and they get a little twisted up here and then.
Yeah, well, usually I'm pretty good. I mean, I started out like 5 or 6 years ago being the queen of healthy desserts and kids' lunches here in the town where I live in Mexico. And I do lots of workshops and, and I still make those desserts sometimes. But I think it is kind of like a lifestyle choice in terms of it being, like there's not dessert in my house every day. That's like, arguably, I'm reinforcing it's like a special occasion thing. But I'd have to say that, I do think there needs to be space in everyone's lifestyle to just, do whatever the thing you like to do that's unhealthy once in a while. And just have, and also, I mean, what I teach my clients is, have the cookie, but don't like secretly, quickly, unconsciously eat the cookie.
Right.
Like just be there with the butter and the chocolate and the sugar. Notice how it hits your brain, your tummy, like how you feel 15 minutes later. Like just be all there with zero judgment and just use it as an awareness building activity to reinforce that, that's why you don't want to eat that every other day. Or, every day or whatever it is.
When we eat it with a side of guilt and shame and everything else, it seems like it sticks to the hips and the butt, like immediately. When we eat it without guilt and with pure enjoyment of whatever it is that we set out to eat in the first place, it's like it just flows and falls off. And it's like, life is good. It's like the mindset around what we eat matters as much as what we're eating.
Totally.
Yeah. That's awesome. So where can people find you, Megan, if they want to get more of all the goodness that you have to offer and learn more from you?
Definitely. Well, my website is meganswanwellness.com, and I spend a lot of time on Instagram. You can always reach out in the direct messages to me there. I'm always happy to get to know people. It's at Megan Swan Wellness, and you can find me on LinkedIn. Same thing, Megan Swan Wellness.
That's awesome. I so very much appreciate you being here today and sharing so vulnerably about your experiences and just, helping us all to kind of level up with the way we think about things and the way that we're processing some of the things that we're all doing very casually and maybe want to re-examine in our lives. So definitely reach out to Megan if you want to learn more about what she has to offer. I will have all of her information in the show notes. And I just thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Teresa. This has been a pleasure.
All right. And go enjoy that birthday lunch with your husband.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks so much for listening. If you loved this episode, please share it with a friend or post on social media and tag me so I can personally connect and thank you. Until next time, keep taking bold and brave action steps towards becoming more of who you want to be in this world. You are capable, you are worthy, and you are enough. Keep shining your light.